Welcome and welcome back to the marketplace. Tonight we're going to be delving in something that probably isn't touched on a lot, the security sector, security personnel, security guards. Of course, there has been a lot of policy changes, policy shifts in this particular sector. We just want to break that down for you. How exactly is it going to affect you, especially considering this also has to do with remuneration, allowances, sometimes salaries. What exactly does this mean? Already in studio, we have two gentlemen, one already within that sector is just going to be telling us what exactly happens there. And then also we have someone in the legal sector who's going to be telling us the legalities, what exactly is the minimum wage for this particular job, and how exactly are Kenyans, working around it. If you could just start by introducing yourself, Kingsley. What exactly is it that you do?
Thank you very much, Ibak, for this opportunity. My name is Kingsley Litali. I'm a veteran from the military and ventured now into corporate security. And I also host a YouTube channel called the Crime Shield Podcast, where we just talk about security every day.
Right, so you're the best person who should be telling us what exactly is happening. Sunday, if you could just tell us, who are you? What exactly do you do?
Thank you for the warm welcome. My name is Sunday Member. I ply my trade as a lawyer, and I manage the practice of Kaya Member Law Chambers.
Right. Welcome to TV47.
I feel welcomed.
So I'll start with you, Kingsley. Around 1.2 million Kenyans are already within this sector. There's 2,500 security firms. Of course, we could have this in perspective, right? And of course, these people are people who work with us, who work around us. There are a lot of people who are working within this sector. How exactly are you forging on in this particular sector?
So first of all, the security space is very dynamic. When you look at before the 21st century, many people viewed security as just managing programs and managing people and information. But it has evolved over time. Security has morphed and the risks have also morphed. With that said, then there's an element called ESRM, Enterprise Security Risk Management, which I think, or I know for a fact, is being implemented worldwide. So right now, when you're seeing these changes and standardization, all these policies coming to play, is an element of that. We need to understand first, when you're talking about security, what are we talking about? It's talking about protection of assets, and these assets can be both tangible and intangible. When you're looking at the space, and especially when you're talking about guards, there are many things that need protecting. But we need to have an all-inclusive approach in terms of, mitigating this thing called security and the risks.
Right. So
in this day and age, I think the regulatory authority has taken a more proactive approach in order to mitigate these risks. By that say, the risks being, the morale of these people who are working, because you need well-motivated people in order to understand and even do their work as security personnel on the ground.
Right, Kingsley, while I still have you, let's just have this in perspective a little bit. Okay. Of course, there are 2,500 security firms across the country employing more than 1.2 million personnel. This is according to the Protective Security Industry Association, an association that I'm sure you are very, well versed with. 2,500 security firms managing 1.2 million personnel. Do you feel like these people are usually spoken for more openly, considering there's, a large disparity between those two numbers?
Yeah, in my opinion, I feel that we haven't made security a day-to-day talk.
Right.
And when you look at the people in this security sector, there are people with families. There are people who pay school fees. There are people who have, their loved ones. In most cases, you find that when now PSRA came in to make the standardization, it made it very clear that, the personnel have to be treated in accordance to the kind of nature of work, basically restoring dignity into the security space, for lack of a better word. Because many people look at security as a third wheel. Practical example, when you're going to weddings, when do we talk about security? You'll sort out the events planner, you'll go for flowers, the meals. Nobody has security in their mindset. In my opinion, I feel that security has to be the backbone of everything, because without security, then even the businesses can't thrive in the first place. Enterprise security risk management is something that if we are able to understand the security in that space, then we'll be able to be, more of an enabler than of a restrictor. Many people view security as a restrictor. That's why they look at it as a third wheel.
Yeah. And speaking of enablers and enabling, Sunday, if you could just tell us, when it comes to the legalities, especially when it comes to representing these people, it's considered more of a minimum wage job. Do you feel like they're represented well, especially when it comes to remunerations?
Thank you. In terms of remuneration, the legal framework surrounding it, as at the moment, is the wages order. Although the Director General Fazul has made a pronouncement via a legal notice number 2 of 2023, directing that the minimum wage be 30,000. I am aware that right now in court, there is a petition challenging the legality of that mandate by Fazul. Nonetheless, there are good intentions towards increasing the welfare of security firms. Before the show, we had a tete-a-tete with my friend here.
Right.
And it concerned the case that is currently beholding the nation.
Right.
Between Joey and the security guard.
Yeah.
I've had a chance to look at the whole draft of the whole judgment, and you will find that the accused person, Joey, was a security guard, well-trained. And what led to his judgment, to his sentencing, was merely the evidence of a private security guard, a watchman, just identifying him as the main suspect and later the guilty person in the commission of the offense. Right. Hence, it forms a critical part of the infrastructure of security in our country. Article 238 of the Constitution defines national security as the services that enable the protection of our property, both from internal and external interference. Therefore, improving the livelihoods of the people in the security sector is very important. Nonetheless, the procedure has to be followed.
Right.
I will refrain from referencing the case that is currently live in court because the rule of sub judice makes me shut my mouth sometimes. But nonetheless, it is important that their welfare be looked at, but it be done according to the law. In my perspective, the right person who has the mandate to improve the livelihoods of these people is the CS in charge of labor and social protection.
Right.
That is the Honorable Florence Bore, I think so.
Yes, it is.
And pursuant to the Labor Institutions Act, that is section 46 of the Act, it enables her to raise the wages order.
Right.
That order has not yet been amended.
Right.
And Fazul came with a good perspective to improve the livelihoods of these people. Yet, from where I sit, it is the duty of the CS because she is in charge of labor, of all people, the labor rights of every person in Kenya, and therefore it rests on her laurels at the moment.
And of course, in every democracy, you do choose people who represent you in different aspects that are going to help you as a Kenyan. And you would be actually not very shocked to know that the CS Florence Bore had somehow, distanced herself from the proclamations of Fazul. Right, and now I have to throw it to you, Kingsley. Okay. When it comes to the welfare of security, of course, there are different cadres of these people. We cannot just say it's a blue-collar job, dismiss it to, security guards that we see manning buildings. Do you feel like the welfare of security personnel is usually looked at?
In my opinion, having been in this industry, I feel it leaves a lot to be desired.
Right.
Yeah, and the act by Fazul is one proactive act that will really restore dignity in the security job.
Right.
Many people look at security as the last option, and yet it's supposed to be one of the only options we have in order to do any business. As I said, security has to be viewed as an enabler.
Right.
Many people view security as a third wheel. It's the last option.
Right.
Yeah, you've gone to school and then you look at security as your last option.
Right.
We need to change that narrative. And in order to change, then, you can't do something the same way and expect different results.
Right.
What Fazul has done, in essence, is, questioning the status quo and changing how we think about security.
Right.
Managing the security function is no longer just a matter of protecting people and information and just merging the IT infrastructure. We're looking at managing protection of information, reputation. All these are intangible assets that if, through, progressively what he has done is that he introduced the aspect of training.
Right.
Where now we have better informed security guards. We saw him go ahead, looking at the bouncers, the so-called bouncers.
Yes.
I call them event security officers.
Yes.
Yeah, even going ahead, encouraging them to go and learn. because at the end of the day, knowledge is power.
Right.
Because sometimes people get into problems when they do not have that idea of, practicing security. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that we have to begin somewhere.
Right.
What he has said is what we call in security lingo, the baselines.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that it is cast in stone that they should be paid that amount of money, but it's a good starting point because these are people who have families, they have people who depend on them, and they play a huge role in terms of, contributing tax to this nation.
Right.
So we do not need to look at them as, second-class people or a job or an industry that has been left over.
Right.
That's why I was talking to my friend here Sunday, and I was telling him that how do you protect information? If somebody comes here at TV47 and is mistreated by the security guard at the door, whose reputation will be damaged? It will be the reputation of TV47.
Right.
So they play a very critical role. That is why it's important for us to, support the regulatory authority by allowing, security guards to undergo the training and even complying by giving them the minimum wage as it was proposed.
Right, and speaking of minimum wage, gentlemen, I just want to have a little bit of perspective within the studio right now. 30,000 shillings, right? I'm sure some of you drive, you pay your rent. 30,000 shillings, if you put it in your mind, what do you spend 30,000 on, roughly?
Now, right now,
in this economy.
In this economy, things are pretty high. But what I'm saying is that it is better to make a step than making none.
Right.
It's a good place to start. And that is why it has to be a conversation for both the stakeholders, a holistic approach for that matter, to enable people to understand that these are people who also pay bills the same way. But now we need to be proactive in the sense that we are encouraging each other in a way that we are seeing the security officers for who they are.
Right.
People who are not only protecting the assets, which are tangible and intangible, but also as human beings who also have families to run.
Right.
So I see that 30,000 is a good place to start.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, to my learned friend, of course, 30,000, it depends, relative. It's a very relative sum. To my learned friend, the firms were required to comply within 7 days. This was the directive by Fazul. Of course, this is a regulatory authority. Usually when a regulatory authority talks, a lot of people take it as, the watchdogs of that particular sector. People scramble to ensure that they are complying. Is 7 days a practical amount of time for compliance?
First, I think every work has dignity. I think those are the words of Martin Luther King.
Right.
That everyone deserves a pay that is equal to what they do. In my perspective, I think 30,000 might be low, but there are procedures that one has to follow to ensure that they are paid that amount.
Right.
The law has stipulated the procedure. It has stipulated who has to do what to enable the fulfillment of that obligation.
Right.
Therefore, despite these good intentions, we should strive to ensure that the means also justify the ends.
Right.
And while I agree with my friend that reforms in this sector are critical, I think he also agrees with me that procedure is also paramount because without procedure, nothing can really work well.
Right.
Regarding the 7 days, it might be less, but in my perspective, having read the notice, I find questions with the legality of that notice. So, because first of all, the notice was published in a newspaper.
Right.
Every pronouncement in Kenya has to be published in the Kenya Gazette.
Right.
That is when it has the force of law. At the moment, it is just a roadside declaration. Despite it being 7 days, it cannot be effectuated.
Right.
Until it has the force of law, the 7 days, however short, is non-operative. So in my perspective, it really doesn't matter because the courts have already put a stop on the order.
Right.
So they don't need to comply with the 7 days.
Right. And true to your word, the court has suspended the implementation. This as the Labour Cabinet Secretary, of course, Florence Bore, distances herself from the proclamation. Now, Kingsley, when you were looking at the people who work, within your firm, you do have a security firm yourself.
Yeah.
Do you believe that this proclamation would have been something that you would have affected, and would it make a difference to the people that work for you?
And that is why I'll take you back to what I said. We need to employ something we call the holistic approach. That's whereby, you know, people understand what security is. I have a feeling that people do not understand how security is and what it is. People look at security as just the guard there with the rungu, or the police, law enforcement, or the military. But security goes beyond that. And that's why I said it's called management or protection of assets.
Right.
When you're protecting these assets, look at the responsibilities that are accorded to this person who's protecting this particular asset, which are both tangible and intangible.
Right.
The reputation part of it. You look at you know, the goodwill that people can lose just simply because they have gone wrong in terms of security. We've seen your example, you know, the critical role that that security guard played in this case.
Yeah.
So that shows that security, if treated and given the kind of you know, dignity it deserves, then there's already more that can be achieved. Right now, when it comes to effecting you know, the act by PSRA, what is mandated to, we were talking earlier, we are not even at 20%.
Right.
So if we are able to get even at 50%, if Fazul gets to 50%, then the security sector will have changed.
Right.
But I totally agree that it is progressive.
Right.
Yeah. And by progressive, I mean that it has to be inclusive. Inclusive in the manner whereby stakeholders need to understand that these people who are coming you know, to work for you are people just like your brother and your sister. The assets that you're protecting, they're assets that, you know, determine your future, because you're also working in order to protect those assets.
Right.
These are people who are coming in to safeguard.
Right.
When you're sleeping, they are awake. We can debate about that, but the fact of the matter is that there are people who put their lives in the line in order to safeguard your property and your assets. So I feel in the industry, this is a good move. Suffice to say, it's not the maximum that they can do, but as I said earlier, it's good that now people are having these conversations. And that for me is a big win, because 10 years ago, we did not have this kind of conversation. We saw a lot of people coming into the industry, and it was all about the lowest bidder.
Right.
So you come, let's say TV47 wants to employ a security firm. One security firm comes and says that per security guard, I'll pay them 30,000.
Right.
Then if I get wind on that information, I come and say that, okay, I'll give you my security guard with 25,000.
Right.
What the regulator is doing right now is trying to bring the standardization, bringing harmony in the industry, whereby we know what is the bare minimum, what is expected from the security guard and what is expected out of the client. So a holistic approach for that matter.
And when you say a holistic approach, of course, this is going to have a ripple effect. If the proclamation does come into effect, it's going to have a ripple effect, not only for security personnel, it's going to have, you know, on the employers, on institutions, on the entire country as we know it. Of course, we will be continuing with this particular conversation. Things are just getting heated up. We're going for a very short break. We'll be right back.
Na safari hii katika Mfahamu Kiongozi tutakuletea viongozi aina mbalimbali.
Nikuwe na Nisani kama 10 na pia nikuwe menua minibus. Minibus niko niwa.
Kushinda unaangalia simu ya mzee. Soma Biblia ama ingia kwa washroom ujisugue. Mpaka nimetoa hivi.
I don't know whether any of my children would want to get into the political field. Sijajua bado.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30 kuendelea.
Join us on a journey through the concrete jungles and rising skylines, where every beam, every nail tells a story of progress and vision.
In every aspect of life, you know, you have to look at several dynamics.
From groundbreaking
Nowadays with the tech, you can check on different websites or you check online and you can see some inspiration. So at least that one would be a direction already. I'll know like what kind of style you're going for.
to finishing touches, witness the dedication of the hard-working teams who bring these ambitious dreams to reality. The Realtor, Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m.
Back to the marketplace for a sector that's barely ever talked about. And of course, we are delving into the rights of the people within this sector, especially when it comes to remuneration. I have just been informed that it's about 100 billion. It's worth about 100 billion Kenyan shillings. Sunday, 100 billion. In perspective, how much, do they usually get? The people who are working on the ground.
Currently, only 20 billion shillings is disbursed to the security guards, but 80 billion shilling is profit to the companies that hire security guards.
Right.
And one has to understand the contractual arrangement security guards have with the employer. Basically, a building needs security.
Right.
They contract a company to provide security guards. The arrangement between the security guard and the company contracted is not known to the owner of the building.
Right.
So, unless the security guard understands what his employer is getting from the building, he really can't know what he's losing on.
Right.
But at this moment, I think from the amount of profits this industry generates in a year, it is very crucial that their wages are increased. But as I stated earlier, according to the law.
According to the law, my learned friend. Now, Kingsley, let's just have a little bit of perspective here as well. The Protective Security Industry Association has been one of the associations that has been against this proclamation. And here comes Sunday saying that a lot of the times it's the companies that usually pocket most of the profit. It's really not going to the people who are on the ground. What are your views on this?
So I think it depends with the kind of company that they are talking about. He's a lawyer, so I think he's privy to that kind of information. I'll speak for myself. When it comes to contractual agreements, it trickles down to what you view your clientele to be.
Right.
And what you want to be viewed as a service provider.
Okay.
In my own opinion, I feel that it is important for, the people who are practicing, the guards, to be remunerated in a way that is befitting their active duty.
Right.
But do not forget that security is broad.
Right.
It's what we call the hybrid approach. In the hybrid approach, that is where you're including tech, there's CCTV, there's a lot of tech stuff going on. There's dogs, which also are paid for. And I talked to my friend called Boniface Mukwa from Top Notch, and he says that when you're having a dog, sometimes when you're doing a quotation for the dog, it's even higher than the one that
for the guard. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If the dog can be paid more than the guard,
right,
then where are we looking at security as a people? Yeah. So when I'm looking at security, I believe that yes, we need to have some semblance of transparency. Transparency in two fronts. Transparency in processes and transparency in the standards that we set.
Right.
What kind of standards are we setting? What do we want to be remembered for in this security industry? The journey to restoring the dignity into the security space starts with, first of all, understanding. As a security provider, what am I supposed to do? As I said earlier, security is supposed to be an enabler. When you're managing these assets, then you're transferring, let's maybe give an example.
Right.
We're in this studio right now. You are our host. You are now what we call the risk owner.
Goodness, my goodness.
Yeah. So the risk owner understands, his or her space. You're understanding the risk that are situated to you being here.
Right.
Me as a security professional, I'm coming in as a stakeholder.
Right.
My role is to advise you commensurate to the risks that you'll bring. So that I'm not coming up with my own blanket risks and just telling you that, okay, you need 5 guards to restore that kind of risk. And yet, maybe it's just the processes that need to be rectified. So in this approach that I think the regulator is using, is trying to give, people an opportunity, both the stakeholders and the clients for that matter, to understand their individual roles.
Right.
Because it cuts across. This is what the clients need to do, and it's what the security company has to do.
Right.
So when the risk owner identifies these risks, then the security practitioner or the company is coming to see what are the probable mitigation strategies that they are supposed to employ in order to minimize that risk or even avoid it.
Right.
Basically, in a nutshell, what I mean is that for security, we need to look at it holistically, where security can be able to do the 4 Ds. The 4 Ds is detect, deter, delay, and probably, in lack of a better word, let me just say the 4 Ds.
Right.
Yeah. So you need to understand the security aspect first, so that you're able to know your role. And that is what we are trying to see what the regulator is trying to do there.
Right.
But it is until we accept our individual roles, that is when we'll be able to understand as clients and as service providers what we need to do in order to make security stand out. And
Right. And just to assure you, gentlemen, as a risk owner, you are very safe. Welcome to TV47, your home of untold stories. Trust me, I hope. I hope I'm not lying right now. I have a person who is in the legal space. I hope I don't get sued, but I can assure you we're all safe in here. Now, Sunday, let me take you back a little bit. Of course, you said that usually for policies such as these, especially concerning remuneration, it's going to be concerning the Cabinet Secretary, Florence Bore. Now, already 9 firms have been, forecasted, or it has been said they have failed to comply. You've said that this is a roadside proclamation in the first place.
Yes.
Should these 9 firms continue operating?
They should continue operating.
Right.
I've also had a chance to look at the legal notice number 1 of 2024, where the Director General, Fazul Mohammed, listed the firms that he allegedly cancelled their licenses. One of the reasons of cancelling their licenses was that they have breached provisions of the Private Sector Regulation Authority Act. He has not given any provisions that have been breached. Secondly, he has listed the second reason for cancellation of the licenses as failure to adhere to the minimum wage requirements, which the court has already pronounced itself in the meantime as illegal. Not as illegal, but put a stay on it. In light of that, they can continue operating. But this is not legal advice. I'm just talking as a legal professional on my side, because the law that has been set has not complied with. The law that has been set has already been stopped by the courts. And secondly, there are no provisions that have been specifically been cited as being breached off by the 9 companies.
Right.
And also, finally, I want to state that despite Fazul making these declarations, there is a need that he ensures that they are gazetted in the Kenya Gazette. The Kenya Gazette is the official publication of the Kenyan government.
Right.
Him just declaring on newspapers that these companies have been cancelled, the licenses have been cancelled, it's not very good. Let him put it in the Kenya Gazette. Then thereafter, people can challenge these decisions in court in a manner that is fashionable, not just in any other manner that he deems fit as a process he likes.
Right, yes. That's stakeholder engagement, ensuring that the people you are talking to, the people you are addressing, know what exactly you're saying and how exactly they should be taking this particular information. Now, there are 2 opposing bodies, I would say, within the same sector. We have PSIA, which is the Protective Security Industry Association, and the PSRA, which is the Regulatory Authority. The regulatory authority comes with this particular, minimum wage that they're going to say the people within this sector should be paid this amount of money. But the PSIA said that there wasn't enough time when this proclamation was being made. And of course, they are not sure how exactly they should go about it. And they are saying that the salary increment is punitive. Now, Kingsley, I must ask you, when these conversations were ongoing, this was a hot topic within your sector.
Yeah.
What exactly were your sentiments at that time? Were you siding with the association or the regulatory authority?
The regulator, the regulator is the final person when it comes to, they're mandated by law.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And at the end of it all, the regulator has a mandate to, steer the security sector in a way that will be able to be fitting for the sector. Right. It's not about anyone's individual intent. It's about the security sector. That is why it is a regulatory authority. For me, I feel like we should not be the kind of people who are, we are self-inhibiting by being our own limitation. By embracing the PSRA directives, I feel that the security sector stands a better chance to restore its dignity. Remember what I said earlier, that for the longest time, people haven't been speaking about security. It's only until when the PSRA started, giving direction, that is when now people have felt that indeed we have security in this country. With that said, I feel that we need to support what the government is putting in place through PSRA and, come to terms. As much as we need to share our opinions, we need to come up with inclusivity in terms of understanding where the regulator came from, understanding the threshold of the clients, because it's a balance. It's not a one-sided game, because you have the clients, you have stakeholders, and as what I said, the security people on its own, they are enablers, they are stakeholders, they have their opinions as well, which is okay. What I mean by saying that support the directives of the regulator is that we stand as an industry to reap a lot of fruits, if at all we really understand the good things that are set aside by PSRA. But if we do not enable ourselves by reading through the mandate given by PSRA, then we stand to lose, because PSRA is the regulator. And it is law. So if you're doing something that is against the law, then, it's like you're shooting yourself in the leg. Yeah.
And of course, it's always good to look at something from every perspective, see who it, favors, who it doesn't favor, what you can work with. And of course, changes can be made with public participation, which is very important, especially when it comes to involving the public, when it comes to these decisions. Now, Sunday, I'm going to be engaging you a little bit here because you are a learned friend. According to legal notice number 125 of 2022, daytime private security guards should earn a minimum wage of around 15,000 shillings in cities. Nighttime private security guards should earn about 16,000 shillings in cities. Now, rates for other areas, of course, is between 8,000 shillings and 9,000 shillings. You do know that, of course, people have different rights, and sometimes when it comes to jobs like this, what people consider blue-collar jobs, it's a matter of willing buyer, willing seller. Are you willing to work with these wages? If not, we'll find the next person. The rates of unemployment is really high. When it comes to, your clients who come to you and they want, to be paid what they actually deserve, how do you go about it?
Thank you. First, this legal notice is the legal notice that is in force. This legal notice was enacted by the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Labor and Social Protection at the time. That's why it has not been challenged in court. It is the minimum wage that any guard in the city or in the village ought to earn. So right now, the Fazul has put in a legal notice number 5 of 2023, which increases the basic salary to 26,000. Additionally, plus NHIF, SHIF, all that will get to 30,000. The good intention, yes, in the sense that we have to improve the livelihoods of people. But it ought to be done how it was done. The Labor Institutions Act provides that when these wages have to be increased, there is a wages council where any person can submit their suggestions, their comments regarding the remuneration of these people. What ought to have been done was that Fazul would have approached the CS Labor, suggested that the pay, that having listened to stakeholders, the minimum pay ought to be 30,000. Thereafter, a legal notice after public participation will be drafted, subjected to parliamentary approval, and then have the effect of being law. And to me, despite the good intentions,
Right.
despite everything, and I've learned a lot from my brother, and I think he speaks to that sector so well.
Right.
Especially the dignity of those people and the magnanimity of that sector. We should improve, but according to the law.
Right,
Simple.
according to the law. Of course, there are ways in which this could be changed. Your intentions might be right, is what Sunday is saying. However, you have not gone through the steps that are required. You said something very interesting, Kingsley. You said that at some point, in some situations, the guard dogs earn more than, the human guards.
Yeah.
When it comes to these numbers and these salaries, this is what some people are earning, especially in other areas, between 8,000 to 9,000 shillings. This could, in a different context, just be what a person pays for parking in Nairobi City within a month, or even less.
Yeah.
What changes do you feel like should be made in regards to the people that you usually represent?
So, in my own opinion, I feel that number one, we need to look at our baselines.
Right.
Where are we starting? What is our starting point? By looking at the kind of the economic times that we are facing right now. So for me, I cannot stick a figure, but what I said earlier, that the proposed amount is a good starting point. It depends. Different areas have different levels of risk. As I said, there's somebody who's probably working in in a bank as a security guard.
Right.
There's another one who is working at an estate and things like that. The risks do vary.
Right.
By us allowing ourselves to go through the steps and learn as security guards, then there's that kind of ladder that you can climb. I've seen people in the industry who started off as security guards, and right now they are lecturers. So we are restoring, in my opinion, how we need to restore hope and restore the dignity of security is by, number one, supporting whatever has already been put there, like enabling the security guards to be trained and hence getting the guard force number.
Right.
We are looking at plausibility and tracking back the source. When you're looking at the bouncers, so-called bouncers, I call them event security officers.
Right. And we should change that even from here. You said they're
event security officers.
Event security officers.
Yeah.
Can we just call them ESOs in short?
ESOs.
Thank you. No more bouncers.
No more bouncers.
Not in this studio.
Not in this studio, yeah.
Thank
You're
you.
the risk owner, so.
I have to comply.
Yeah. So when you're looking at what the regulator has done, I always say that change equals opportunity.
Right.
So changing the attitude of how people perceive security starts by changing our attitude.
Right.
How do you change an attitude? Through learning. So when the guards are well trained and they understand the threshold of whatever they need to do, they are put in a place where they understand what they are getting into.
Right.
It's not a matter of just telling a security guard to go and stand there.
Right.
What are they protecting? But now you're telling this security guard that you're not only protecting this metallic gate, but you're responsible for the assets that are here, including information. Both tangible and intangible assets, hence the training.
Right.
And you saw procedurally that is what the regulator started with.
Right.
He insisted that we need to have guards who are trained. So there are schools that are gazetted to provide that kind of training.
Right.
And those people who, complied with that are seeing the difference.
Right.
This creates a channel where we can grow. This standardization by the regulator is an enabler.
Right.
Because without a framework, it's like, let me use sports. If you're going to play a rugby match, but you're coming with a football, how will you score?
Context is very important.
Yes.
Right,
So,
Kingsley. Let me just cut you off for a minute there. I'll, of course, let you engage in that. But you have mentioned something on training, which is very important. As you have said, there are different cadres, there are different things that should be guarded, and of course, people should be trained in different capacities. Gentlemen, I will bring your attention to, proclamation that was made from the Office of the President speaking on the state of security in universities, colleges, national polytechnics, and TVETs in the country, and meeting with heads of security in respect or with respect to institutions of higher learning. It, of course, the long and short of it is that it concerned, training of these institutions, people who safeguard these institutions, how exactly they are treated, how exactly they treat people. And of course, this must come from changes that have been seen or situations that have been witnessed in universities and institutions of higher learning. This comes from the Ministry of Interior and National Administration. Now, let me just bring your attention to one of, one of the paragraphs that was being talked about. Now it says, and I'll read it to you. In view of the foregoing, the government has commenced the mandatory nationwide security vetting, training, and licensing of all in-house security officers employed in institutions of higher learning, contracted private security officers, and all officers offering security services, be they employed by the said institution or otherwise engaged as private security service providers. In this regard, the authority has organized a sensitization forum at the Kenya School of Government. Of course, the government is now taking initiative by, on their own, by themselves, to ensure that at first the security personnel within public institutions, especially in universities, are trained. When it comes to training, Sunday, if you could just tell us, is it, training is usually an initiative of the employer. A lot of these, guards and security guards are considered blue-collar individuals. Do you believe that this is a good move by the government to start, themselves by training, security guards? Should this be emulated by private security firms? Is this something that the regulator could enforce going forward?
Yes, indeed. It is a good move by the government. But my only issue with it is that it's very reactionary. Initially, the government had put laws regarding Airbnbs after the initial murders that happened in the beginning of this year. When cases regarding insecurity in university campuses increased, the government commenced the vetting, training, put up this order. It is very reactionary.
Right.
For us to really have a good framework to govern security, as my good friend has said,
right,
it has to be wholesome. It cannot be reactionary. Tomorrow something will happen regarding security, the government will put up a notice. We can have 30 notices, but that is not sufficient. The laws are there, the regulations are in Parliament right now, awaiting approval by Parliament. When the Director General has all these tools at his disposal, he ought to ensure that the framework is a smooth running machine. It ought not to be reactionary. When something happens, let's not have a legal notice, but let's see what ought to have been done being done.
Right.
Not telling us now we want to do this and this and that after this has happened. That is not very good.
Right.
We should have procedures that are always repetitive. They are part and parcel of our security infrastructure. That is my perspective regarding this notice.
Right.
It is good, but not good enough.
Right. Good, but not good enough. You should anticipate situations and then make, legal notices upon them, which could help in curbing a lot of situations that we usually see. Kingsley, this, of course, touches on your particular sector. This just was released just yesterday. It involves the public sector, but you are in the private sector. You are in the, opposing, I wouldn't say opposing necessarily, but parallel, I think is a better word. You are in the parallel part of this particular sector. Do you believe that this is good? Do you believe that training is where we should be heading to as a country?
Yeah, first of all, I want to tell my friend Sandy that it is not reactive, because the training was a topic that has been discussed ever since last year. And hence, having vetted and vetted training centers that were gazetted. So the meeting that I think is being convened there was with reference to the universities.
Right.
We need to have harmony.
Right.
There's something called an ICS, an incident command structure, where when you find that there's an incident somewhere, you'll have the police, you'll have probably the military there, and definitely the first person on the scene is a security guard.
Right.
So in the universities, we do have the security guards, but they also have the security managers in charge of the safety and security of the institutions.
Right.
So by them getting into that seminar and training, it is a way of bringing seamless, workflow, as you put it, in terms of not being reactive, but working harmoniously in order to mitigate the risk that can happen.
Right.
So training is good because it is a shift of attitude. We get to learn what does this other party do. You remember when we had the incident of Westgate, the incident command structure was seen there. So people understand if the military comes, this is the person who is in charge. There's a clear communication path. So when there's an incident like what we saw probably happening in universities, as government, it has to take action. And that is not saying that they are being reactive, because the measures are already there. But when something happens, then something has to be done. For every action, there has to be a reaction. So it's not saying that they are being reactive. The schools were there. The thought of having this training being done right now is something that is very timely, because now we need to understand, as a security manager or a CSO of a university, what is my duty in accordance to that university, and what is my duty commensurate to what the regulator wants. So it is a matter of standardizing and harmonizing how we approach the security sector. It's not a matter of being reactive. It's a matter of trying to levelize, because as I said, change equals opportunity.
And I feel like I opened a Pandora's box, because this looks like an argument that is about to break out, and to, you know, let me just try to dissolve this argument before it even starts, because I feel like our time is running out right now. The measures are there. Are the measures adequate, however? That's the argument that's going to happen. And gentlemen, if I keep you here for the entire night, I'm sure there won't be a solution for that particular conversation. But I will leave you to give your closing remarks now that we are concluding. Do you feel, Kingsley, like the sector is where it's supposed to be? Before I come to you Sunday, do you feel like it's where it's supposed to be? Do you feel like this is, you know, one of the moves that's going to trigger a lot of changes that are good for the sector?
It's good that you use the word change. And if there's anything that our viewers can get home with is change equals opportunity. The security space is an opportunity that is waiting for everyone, because we are the owners of these assets. Assets are both tangible and intangible. So for me, I feel that the sector is just warming up. There's still more to come. There's more that we can do. It's all about we as Kenyans, we as players in the industry, and people in general to understand that security's dignity has to be seen for what it is. So I feel that we're just warming up in the security industry. And we're just warming up. And that's really good. I feel like that's you're ending on a very strong note. I really like that. Sunday, when it comes to legalities, matters are usually black or white, yes or no. It's very binary in this, you know, instance. And you have been, you know, very open about whether these things are legal, how exactly should people be going around it. But your concluding statement on this particular affair, where do you feel that this is going to go?
First, my friend is very polished in this sector.
The
intellectual discourse is quite interesting. Nonetheless, my perspective is legal. I'm not a security officer. I've never worked in that sector. The legal regime that governs security is well set out. There is an act. There are regulations that have to be put in place. They're just awaiting approval by Parliament. The main important thing is to do things. When the regulations are in place, as my friend says, let's just do those things. So if we do those things, I hope, I pray that security, our national security as enshrined under Article 238 of the Constitution, will be much better. Those are my final remarks.
Just do it. Nike. Of course, this conversation has been very, very, you know, rife, and it has been very important for us to talk about this particular sector, a sector that's barely ever touched on, a sector that employs 1.2 million Kenyans, and of course a sector that keeps on taking different people. We have touched on how different people work within different cadres of this particular sector. Thank you so much for joining us. This is The Marketplace. Next week, we talk about a topic that, of course, touches on the people. This is a marketplace.